Hi everyone, this is Unlock Commerce with Mason. And today we're talking to Rashel, and I'm going to let Rashel introduce herself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Rashel Hariri, and I'm from Toronto, Canada. Well, actually, I just live just north of Toronto, but I've spent the past 12 years in the digital marketing space, working in the nonprofit sector, in banking, in food and beverage at McDonald's, and also most recently in technology and e-commerce at Shopify. Since then, I have left my corporate career and have been working as a consultant and freelancer with SaaS companies, SaaS applications, as well as DTC brands. And so now I'm here to chat with you all about go-to-market strategies and how to position yourself in market with a new launch.
Would you tell us a bit more about your work with the SaaS and tech companies and your work with the DTC brands? What's different? What are things that stand out to you?
So I should actually take a step even further back from that. I'm more in the e-commerce space, right? And so within the e-commerce space and the e-commerce ecosystem, there is a mix of many, many verticals. There are the D2C brands that are creating products and getting them into market. There are SaaS applications and companies that plug into these D2C brands platforms that they use. So for example, there's a bunch of applications and technology companies that are connected into Shopify, into Adobe, into all sorts of these platforms that are helping retailers and e-commerce businesses thrive. So I'm in a really interesting intersect where I work on both sides. So I get to see the pain points of the merchants and their plans and how they strategize for go-to-market and launch and create a brand and business. Then I also work with the technology companies that enable these merchants to be successful. And within that technology umbrella, there's many different verticals, right? Because there's companies that do shipping and fulfillment. There's companies that do marketing services. There's companies like yourself. So there's a whole host of folks that I work with. And so the approach for each, depending on if I'm working with a D2C brand or a SaaS application, is quite different, although they all very much work together, because I may have a D2C client, but I'll be recommending to them SaaS applications and tools that will help them be successful and manage their business.
Yeah. So maybe let's start with that, right? What would you say is different about building a DTC go-to-market strategy?
Well, I think there's a lot of differences. I mean, at the end of the day, when you're building a marketing strategy, whether it's technology or it's D2C, you have to be audience first, and understanding your audience personas and who you're actually selling your product to. Who is it for? Whether it's a bottle of water or it is the technology that's going to enable them to run their SMS marketing campaigns, you need to know who you're starting with. So first step in strategy is identifying your buyer personas, really going deep on who they are, their interests, why your product would be the best fit in market, considering all of the other potential competitors in your vertical or industry. And then moving from there, then strategizing, okay, what is the value that we're bringing to these consumers? Where does our product stand out against potential competitors? Are we in a blue ocean? Are we in a red ocean? How many people are we fighting against? What's our competitive matrix? And then from there, also ensuring that your product, whether it's a technology product or a D2C product, is actually a good product. Many times there's a lot of jokes in the D2C space of people creating like a new pen, and they're like, this pen is revolutionary because it'll change your life, and you're like, it's just a pen. It's good marketing sometimes and branding, but really understanding the pain point that you're solving. Why do you exist? And I mean, of course, like there's exit strategies for certain folks that are making that pen. Like there's a strategy behind doing that. But I think it comes down to first your audience, then understanding your value, understanding your market and your competition, and then building out your own brand narrative and strategy.
What are some approaches you would suggest to people as they're trying to figure these things out?
Depending on the product, let's say we're on the D2C side and what you're looking to launch in market and how you want to launch, I think your narrative is super important. So understanding, first step is understanding your market, your persona, all of these things, what your value is. Then there's kind of like this transition from what value you bring to what your narrative and story is and how you bring that to market. And some exercises you can do to identify that are very simple, like Miro brainstorming boards that would help you identify what your brand is, what is the story you're trying to tell. Even, if it's a brand, are you pushing forward the founders behind the brand? oftentimes that's interesting to consumers? Or are you keeping it very high level and just pushing the product and the brand because you don't want to have that person behind the product? So there's a lot of decisions that need to be made in the early steps of building your brand and your positioning. And even myself right now, I'm working on a skincare product with a friend of mine, and we're having these very same conversations. Do we want to push our names? Do we not? How do we bring it to market? And I think in D2C right now, especially in small business, you're seeing a lot of these business owners putting themselves front and center. You're seeing them all across TikTok, you're seeing them on Instagram. And so when consumers are purchasing, not only are they purchasing your product, but if they like you, they're part of your community and they're somewhat supporting you, they want you to succeed.
How do you think that translates over to SaaS and technology?
SaaS and technology, it's interesting as well because you do have a lot of these founders, technology founders, who also put their stamp on their product. They're building in public on Twitter and starting from a very grassroots level where there may be an app developer or someone who's like, hey, I'm a 3-time founder. I'm creating a new product. I'm going to share my whole process, my wins, my losses, etc. So that as well is something that you see on both sides. It's more of like a human approach now more than ever. And I think with consumers or even on the enterprise side or wherever you're buying from, at the end of the day, you're buying from people. So whether you're buying into someone's SaaS technology and company, it's sometimes because you believe in the founder, because you know the founder, and you are almost guaranteed that if they've done a good job in the past, that this product that they're building is going to do well. And the same with the brands themselves. And I think consumers at the end of the day now, they have so much power with their money and they're voting with their money. And so as a founder, whether you're SaaS technology or not, depending on the avenue, if you're going on a more grassroots level, building in public is a fantastic idea from both sides.
With technology companies and SaaS startups marketing to founders themselves, do you think that there might be what might be the pitfalls in putting your face forward?
Oh, so many. I mean, definitely one of the areas as well is founders move on. Not every entrepreneur, as an entrepreneur, you know that you're going to create something and at one point it's not just going to be yours. And that creates a branding complication for, let's say, the marketing team. If you're lucky to have a marketing team, or for future purposes, who buys over your company? Because in the long run, the benefits currently starting with a founder's name who's well known is the respect that you're going to get for your product, the visibility that you're going to get for your product. But over time, as this founder leaves, it becomes a branding strategy issue where you need to go back to your brand narrative and say, okay, without this figurehead, what are we? Because oftentimes it's that figurehead that narrates what happens and how things go to market, how the product is spoken about. And there needs to be then like a revamp of brand marketing and a shift in how you appear in market. Oftentimes, because they're so closely linked together, that's a really big struggle. But there are a lot of things that you can do to combat that. There's ways for you to reshift your narrative, go back to your early strategy, revisit the market again, and then come up with new messaging and revisit even your target audience and making sure that you're attracting the people that you want and you're almost firing those clients that you don't want, that aren't going to be high value.
When you're just starting to go to market, right? How do you start? How do you tell who your community is? How do you figure out the initial community and what makes them different from who you're looking at 6 months later or at the next stage?
Yeah, I think in the very early stages, it's all about being scrappy. And so who are the people that you're going to attract that are going to listen to you? How are you going to build those relationships? I think that's also a reason why now more than ever, you're seeing a lot of head of community roles at companies, because they understand the value of having a group of advocates that will circle around your product and vouch for it. So even in the early stages, let's say if you're a SaaS application tech company, you can start building out your network. Oftentimes, there's a few different avenues. If you're a tech company, there may be agencies that you're working with, like typical agencies that have clients themselves. It may be building other partnerships with smaller organizations that could be at the same level as your brand and business. And that's like a grassroots way of building community, reaching out to specific people and saying, hey, this is what we do. Let's have a conversation. Let's bring you in. And starting to tweet to them and building an online community around it. But I think at the very end, you need to have, as the person who's managing the community, an opinion on why your brand or business exists, insights about what's happening in the market that you can share. You really can't start this type of community without having an opinion on something. That's sort of what attracts people. That's what attracts conversation. And if you're really not saying anything, then you might as well not be online at all.
What's your advice for startups that are moving to the next stage that's beyond, like they've done a bit of the reaching out, they've built that initial community, and now they're looking to scale that up?
I think a big part of that as well is creating events. So I know in the tech space, community events are huge. It's a great opportunity to get people to interact with each other, to get them to tell friends of friends to invite them to these events. You guys are doing a great job with your online webinars and bringing people together. It's a little bit different now because of the COVID scare. It's harder to have in-person meetups, of course, but there's many ways around that. You can have digital meetups, you can have connects, and also at some point when a company has grown to a certain extent, that's where usually you start to see someone come into the company or into the startup as like head of partnerships. So that's also another person that's going to help you with building this community. You're building a community of partners that are going to rally around your product. It's part of this ecosystem that will make your business successful. And so it's like your community is one pillar, your partnerships is another lever, and then finally you have your end customer, which could be your merchant, and then your merchant's customer as an offshoot of that.
In terms of like a DTC founder, like for example, you said you're looking at building out a skincare brand. How is your approach to community different? How would you, as a DTC brand owner, say identify your community and where they are?
It also, again, it goes back to those initial brand personas customer personas that you're building. So for example, skincare, it's a lot easier for me because I love skincare. I'm all about skincare. So I know where these people spend their time, what they're looking at, what brands they follow. So it becomes a little bit easier there to have conversations about things that are specific. So for example, in skincare, we talk a lot about the ingredients. We talk a lot about the benefits, the length of time it takes to start seeing results for these particular products. And so creating those values into our messaging and into our narrative as a product that works, that you see proven results, that makes a change to your skin texture, tone, etc. That's sort of like what we're looking to build out and move forward. But I will say it's not an easy feat, especially if you're starting from zero. It's a lot easier to take over a brand that already has maybe a few hundred followers and you can start engaging them. But when you're starting from zero, I often say it helps to do giveaways. It helps to have like different types of engagement tools, polls, interactivity with the community to help them grow. But then you also look at some of the organic methods that you can use through social media. So for example, TikTok is massive right now. Reels on Instagram get you more reach than anything, and you don't have to spend any money on it. So looking at ways like that to experiment and build content and have interesting content that actually gives people value will help to attract the right community that you want. But that's also like one step of many as you're building. There's many different levers that you can pull on, and also paid advertising. I'm a big fan of paid ads all the way. Will drive the right people because you're targeting them based on interest, based on what other brands they like, what other communities they are a part of.
People who are stretched so thin with their own personal brands that they don't know which avenue to start with, which channel to start with. And when you mentioned polls, what I was thinking of was like, there's nothing quieter than like a question you've asked on social media that 0 people have responded to.
That's one of those things that like is so painful. The most painful thing when you ask a question, you're like, hello, did anyone hear that? But I think it's a good experiment and a good test, but you're absolutely right. Like if you put out a question and no one cares, I feel like that also gives you an answer in a sense. But if you have, let's say if you have no community, don't start with polls because there's going to be no one there listening who's going to respond to you. But I completely feel you. And on your point about merchants being stretched so thin, I think that's the hardest part. As a merchant who's starting a brand, you are basically managing your logistics. You are managing your ads, you're managing your brand, you're managing your product, you're managing like end to end every part of your business.
Like there are 1,000 different things you can do. There are even like 4 big platforms you can be on, right? How do you start? Like what would your advice be in terms of which platforms to pick first? What are metrics or ways to approach them to decide what's right for you?
Yeah, I think so. In my eyes, the biggest platforms, of course, that are most helpful in the D2C space right now, depending on your product, of course, Instagram, TikTok for sure. TikTok advertising has seen a significant increase. It's doing really well for a lot of small businesses, and it's not too expensive. Pinterest is one that I'm seeing a lot more brands dabbling with. It's a completely different ballgame. You can sometimes take some of your content that you use for Instagram and TikTok and repurpose it for Pinterest. Pinterest videos have increased. They're almost shifting into more video in terms of their pins and less like static images. But any videos that you put on that platform as well, they should tell a story and a narrative. They should explain to you, like, when you get this product and you drink it, it makes you feel X, Y, and Z, and less just like really fancy product shots and more so the value and what it gives. The great thing about Pinterest as well is it's a search engine for images and video as well. So people are actively looking for things, and you want to base it off of those key terms that they're searching. I think Pinterest is one of those platforms that's often forgotten about, to be totally honest. I think TikTok is the hot one, Instagram is there, and of course with Facebook backing everything that you do on Instagram and their ads platform, those are generally where people go first. And then of course for technology and SaaS companies, LinkedIn, Twitter, that's kind of your holy grail. And then also if you're looking to build some more grassroots approaches, then going on to Reddit, or if you're going to do live streaming of your technology and product development, then Twitch is also a great option as well.
What are some failures or big don'ts that you think people should keep in mind?
I think having a plan is really important, but recognizing that your plan, you may have to pivot. And I think that's what you see a lot with D2C brands. Like, you start creating something, you think this is what the consumer wants, and you start going to market, and then you realize like, oh, the feedback we're getting is that we need to change our color, we need to rebrand, it's not hitting the right message. So what I always say to founders is, think of your product and as your launches as an experiment. Nothing is set in stone. And I think for me, the biggest failure is when I see people that are not flexible, they're not ready to make a change, they're not ready to evolve. And I think also when you're first launching a product as well, one thing that I recommend, although not everyone agrees with this method, is doing some test marketing first, especially if you're in the D2C space. Don't just go buy 5,000 units of a product. That could be a very costly mistake that you don't want to make, right? Start in smaller batches, seed these batches, get feedback, work with smaller groups. There's nothing wrong with that. I think some people have the perception that they have to go big and it has to be huge. And sure, if that's your motivation, that's fine. But I think sometimes playing it safe and more strategic in terms of like, I'm only going to get 100 units of this thing. I'm going to experiment with these 100 units. I'm going to experiment with my packaging and my messaging, and then evolve that for if I need to grow, if I need to change, if I need to add new products to my line. I think the difference is with SaaS, it's really like less cost associated, right? It's more the time that you spend to build, and once you've built your product, you're good to go. It's built. But then also understanding that you're probably going to have to make some changes, like your V1 that you launch in market versus your V4, like 6 months later, is going to change. And I think one of the biggest mistakes people often make is not listening enough to their users, not setting up those email flows where they're getting more regular feedback, where they're engaging them. And especially on the SaaS side, SaaS, you always start with a trial. So making sure to nurture those folks that started with a trial. If you're giving them 2 weeks, if you're giving them 30 days, whatever, it doesn't make a difference, but it's what you do with those people. If you get 1,000 people to sign up for your SaaS product, first of all, if you're just launching, that's amazing, congratulations. And also then, what do you do with them? How do you bring them down the funnel? And I often find the mistakes that both on the D2C side and the SaaS side do you see is they don't have a consumer journey or funnel in place. So like when you first have that communication or that level of awareness, how do you take them into consideration? What do you do with them at that stage? And then how do you bring them further down the funnel and drive them into advocacy?
Do you think there's a difference in the audience themselves though, in terms of people who want consumer products and people who are using technology to run their business, like in their approach and their mindset?
At the end of the day, it could be the same person, right? Like I could be looking for a SaaS application for my skincare line, let's say, and then I could also be looking for products that I want to use myself. So although the consumer is the same, it's almost like they switch hats. if you're looking for your SaaS application that you're using, there's different criteria that you're going to have. And I also think you're going to be a little bit more specific with what you're using, what you're purchasing in the business. Of course, branding is important, the narrative is important, and why you're using a product is important. At the end of the day, there are some shifts, but value is the same. I want to get good value from the product I'm buying, and I want to get good value from the SaaS application. My decision process could be a little bit different in terms of how
it
they
also
target.
feels like a little bit more of like a long-term commitment when you sign up for technology.
It does, but I would also argue that it doesn't necessarily, because unless you're buying, let's say you're hosting your website and you're buying an annual rate for like $100 versus monthly for, I don't know, $15, you get those deals. It's not, depending on what you're committing to, you can always back out, right? Like you can always like pause, you can always stop using that SaaS application. And we see that happen a lot, especially for startups. They'll start using one product and then they realize like their team is growing, or it's not necessarily serving their needs anymore, maybe 3 months and maybe 6 months, and then they have to cancel that contract and move on to something else. But you are right in the sense that there's more contracts involved. When you purchase a D2C product, your contract is that you've made the sale.
I want to entirely shift gears here, and I'd love to hear more about your skincare brand, if you'd like to talk about it.
Our skincare product that we are in the midst of creating and bringing to market, we're also starting with a very small batch. We want it to be very exclusive to just a small community or group of people that are interested in this type of benefit. We're focusing exclusively on an exfoliation product, a deep physical exfoliator that also moisturizes and peels your dead skin off. It's also a product that I grew up using. I have an Iranian background, and it's something that we had in our household that my mom would purchase. And now we're shifting the ingredients in the products. We're making it more natural. We're making it more, 2021, let's say. We're working on our branding right now, and we're starting small. So for us, it's important to start at a grassroots level, build that community of people who actually like this product. And who understand our messaging, and then grow from there. The drive behind it too is, so my friend and I, we actually worked together 10 years ago, and we worked quite well together. Then we both moved on in our different ways, but we'd always wanted to do something more entrepreneurial and product-based. And so we came together. We initially started a printing company where we were creating really beautiful designs that were targeted to women of color, because we felt like there wasn't enough art being sold online. There's a lot of really beautiful art, but they didn't look like me. And I didn't feel like it was something that I wanted to put in my home. And so we started creating designs and selling that art. And it did quite well. We ran that business for, I think, about like 6 to 8 months. And then from there, we started to lose the passion for the product. And we started to think like, well, what else do we really like? What else do we really want to put in market? So I told my friend about this idea. I showed her how the skincare product works. She loved it and was like, how did I not know this exists? And from there, the fact that she loved it so much, we were like, okay, more people should know about this. And that was kind of the drive and inspiration. And, skincare is a massive, massive market. And if we can just get in and get a small piece of that market and build our own community surrounded around our brand and product, that would be a success for us.
What is something you hold on to personally to find that drive when you can't?
You know what it is for me, and I always joke with friends that I'm someone that has no chill. Like, I just always like to be doing things. I always like to be keeping busy. I'm always just like learning and exploring and seeing what's out there. And I think that's my motivation, is just learning and doing and making impact. And sometimes the challenge too for a lot of people, even now, especially during COVID, I'm seeing a lot of people change jobs, quit companies, things like that, is even sometimes when you are making impact and you're doing something really well, it fizzles. And oftentimes that's, to me, a sign of like, okay, I need to pause and think, what do I want to do with my time? Because more than anything, to me, time is very valuable. So how do I want to spend my time? How do I want to live my day? And then that's how I focus on what I want to do next. So I don't know if there's like a specific quote or anything like that, but that's kind of like how I motivate myself and keep going. think feedback from your customers can come in many forms. So first is through your social channels and your community as you're building that out. Almost like taking that build in public approach where whoever is managing those communities, just keep it casual. I think the last thing people want is to feel like they're interacting with a very corporate brand or business. So number one, look at your socials. Who are the people that are following you? They're obviously there for a reason. Look to them for feedback. Ask them specifically, like, hey, we launched this thing. We just want to know, like, thumbs up, thumbs down. What are you thinking? Should we change the color? Should we do this? Do you want us to see anything else? And then also through your email engine and SMS. If you have clients or customers that are already working with you, use those channels, build that feedback loop into your sales. So as someone's purchasing a product, they sign up, that day they should get an email. A week later, you should do a check-in. A month later, you should also do a check-in. But it's understanding at what points, based on your product or your service, that you want to reconnect and make sure that they are enjoying it. If you're, for example, a SaaS application and you have a trial, check in throughout the trial. How's it going? Do you have any questions? Do you need help with anything? Once they're close to either extending the trial and you're upselling them or they're going to close, also, nurture any of those active buyers that you have. On the D2C front, there's one company, also skincare, of course, because I love skincare. It's called Monday Born Beauty. And one thing that stood out for them and why I like them is, number one, of course, there's an influencer who started this company. So number one, she already has a community that's really good for her because she can launch her product and has people who are ready and willing to buy. But she took a different approach. She took a much smaller scale approach in terms of launching her product. Again, had very limited funds, made sure that she tested her product and her skincare line with a specific group of people who also had the same issues that she was trying to combat, collected feedback from them, worked on the product, and she in a way built in public as well, but through Instagram and some of the other channels that she uses. She also tied into a very, very small community called Bobble.com. Bobble.com allows influencers to come and share their skincare products and provide feedback on them. So she also directed her community there. And I thought that was a really, really smart way to break into the skincare industry, understanding that there's so many skincare giants. People who purchase skincare products are very loyal to those products if they work for them. And so breaking through required a different type of strategy. And so I really like the approach that she took. She didn't spend, thousands or millions of dollars on ads. She started grassroots and has since built her brand since then. And she's been featured in massive magazines and publications that are also supporting her brand and business. And then from the SaaS side, I think there's so many interesting companies like Yotpo is a really amazing one. Their story is fantastic. It's two friends from Israel who started actually a review company, which is like the base of what Yotpo does, as a result of, like a joke that they had with another friend. They were trying to come up with a concept for their product, and that's where Yotpo grew. And since then, they're now massive. Like, I think they're like billion-dollar corporation now. But I also think that they're a really interesting company as well, because they are very specific for what they do for merchants. They also had crafted or carved their own section. So like initially when you think about it and you're like, okay, product reviews, like what's the big deal about that? It doesn't seem groundbreaking, but then when you actually realize the conversion that it creates, the connection and communication between your buyers when they receive the product and the feedback that you get, they carved out this area of e-commerce where they, made it known that customer reviews actually make a big impact on your business and your sales. And they created, an in-email service that makes it super easy for you to get that information from your customers and then publish it through your different website and publications. So that's another company that I think is really good. But I could go on. Like there's Bold, there's Klaviyo, there's a lot of really amazing SaaS companies that are doing great stuff. Some of them from Canada, so I'm proud of that. But that would be one that just comes to mind. One of the biggest, so I'll take a step back and first talk about some of the trends that we've been seeing in D2C over the last year and a half, I'd say. So initially it was a significant increase in how much people were spending, right? Like it was one of the biggest Black Friday, Cyber Mondays that we had seen over the last year. Sales were up. If you were starting an e-com business and you were managing your marketing and go-to-market well, you were getting the sales. It was people were home, they were frantic, they were using retail therapy as a way to deal with what was happening in the pandemic. Since then, though, we've seen a lot of changes, and I always like to look at what's happening in society to determine what's going to happen with your business as well. So there was a series of lockdowns, people, not being able to leave their houses as much, a lot of restrictions happening over the last year. And I think as you'd see the summer months coming around, consumers would not shop online as much. And that's what I was hearing a lot across D2C space as well. And also the price, like your CPC and bidding that you were doing through ad buying also increased. It was quite expensive, especially during the summertime. So what I was seeing was a lot of brands pivoting and reducing their ad spend, which I have to say, since September, I have seen such an increase in ad usage across Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. Summertime was a lot lighter. And I think a lot of these merchants and brands had switched their strategies to say, okay, it's getting too expensive to acquire new clients and get visibility. Let's use this time to work on our CRM programs. Let's use this time to work on our existing customers and how to keep them active and engaged and involved. And so a lot of strategies actually shifted from being specific go-to market to then nurturing your active user base. That did make it a bit tricky for brands that were just launching because they did need to spend a little bit of money to get that visibility and awareness. But I think if you had a successful brand or a brand that actually had like a decent consumer size, it was all about looking inward and saying, what are we going to do with our SMS marketing? What are we going to do with our email marketing? How do we revitalize this group? And any new products that we're launching, how do we give them exclusive access first before we go to market? Take a look at your content strategy and what you're building right now and putting into market. Always do different experiments and testing. I don't know if you have built that into your plans. Oftentimes what happens with marketers, I find, is we get an idea and we just kind of stick to it and we put all our eggs in one basket. What I would recommend is building different streams, different pillars, where you can create your own organic funnels through different activations that you have. You can tap into influencers, you can tap into some of your merchants that are a bit more popular. You can also work on case studies as an example. So if you know of one of your merchants that has actually done really well as a result of using Mason, tap into those stories. A lot of what you're going to be doing on the organic side is storytelling, pushing value, but in a way that doesn't feel as salesy. And I think for the organic channels as well, if you're focusing, let's say on Twitter, start building a community around the people that would use your product. So define who those people are, find the profiles, start reaching out, start bringing them into your community, give them, free trials, give things away. I think one thing to consider is just stepping away from it feeling like such a corporate communication as you're using these social channels. It's all about storytelling. I always give some recommendations for different applications. I used to actually work in the ecosystem at Shopify, so I knew a lot of the different apps that were launching and the benefits that they had for merchants. We always used to say a quote, and I think I might mess up the number now, but successful merchant businesses have at least, I think, like 5 or 6 applications that they plug in. So typically what happens is when you start your business and you get the platform, it's great. There's a lot of basic tools that are available to you, but you can plug into applications such as Klaviyo, Privy, which is now taken over and acquired by Attentive. So those ones actually help you a lot with management of your marketing. So for example, like your pop-ups that you get on your website, things like that can be managed through these applications. There's one app that I really love. It's called Lucky Orange. So if you're in the Shopify ecosystem, you can use Lucky Orange. It literally records the screen. No privacy issues on this, but it records the screen and it heat maps anybody that visits your website. So oftentimes one of the biggest barriers for D2C brands is not understanding why they have such high bounce rates and why their consumers are not adding to cart and then finally not converting and making the sale. So this actually will send you these videos where you can watch and see, like, where did the consumer click? How much time did they spend on this page? Where did they leave? And that'll help you in terms of managing the experience on your website, the copy and content on your website. And one thing I mentioned earlier is always experimenting and testing. So you may realize your H1 header on your website is just not strong enough, or there's too many clicks to get to your product page, or your shop now button needs to be at the top and it's not there, or your trial needs to be at the top and right now it's in the middle of the page. So that's another application that I highly, highly recommend.